What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Hello. Welcome back. Episode 34 and another 3 light bulbs for you, all from client work this week. I haven't actually had any workshops, which has been unusual, but I've got 3 from my client work this week, which I am looking forward to sharing with you. Quick update on the challenge for next week, depending on when you are listening to this. The time audit is the free download on the website. If you haven't already checked that out, head to the website and download the free 3-day time audit. You need to know where your time is going. Before you even start to think about trying to get clear on where you want your time to go, you need to understand where your time is going. You need to understand where time is being lost, where time is being invested, and where you then want to spend your time to be the most effective, to be the most efficient, to be the best possible leader. If you have not already looked at your time audit, then I want you to head to the website and go and download it. It's all completely free. So the week that commences the 6th of July, I'm running a free challenge for the people who have already completed the time audit. Over 5 days, we are going to implement a small change every day that I know is going to have a huge impact. The free download does everything you need it to do. There's some people like a little bit more, some people like support for that implementation, and some people want that little bit extra, and that's what the challenge is going to do. There's a possibility I will run the challenge again. For those of you in the leadership community, I'm going to upload the 5 days of emails and videos so that you can complete that challenge at any point, and it will become part of the onboarding for the leadership community. So that being said, let's get into the 3 light bulbs for this week. Now, the first light bulb, we used an analogy that you may or may not be familiar with. So I'm just going to briefly talk through the analogy so that it makes sense. Otherwise, it's just going to be very confusing. And you're going to think, Zoe, what on earth are you talking about? There is a video clip online of a professor in a university who is demonstrating the importance of how we prioritize things in life. And he uses a jar, rocks, pebbles, and sand as the analogy stroke metaphor. And what he talks about is that the rocks are the most important things in our life, and they have to go in the jar first. Then we fill it up with the pebbles, which is the small stuff that needs to be done. And then the sand, all of the small things that we need to do because life is life and there are lots of things that need to be done, but they are less important than the rock and the pebbles. But if we put all of the sand into the jar first, there is no space for the pebbles, let alone the rocks. So the analogy and metaphor talks about how we need to understand what is most important to us, and we need to make sure that the jar, being life, is filled with the rocks first, then the pebbles, and then the sand can fit in around it. And I use the same analogy with leaders when we're talking about organizing your work. And it's where the AAA time framework came from. Ascend are your rocks equivalent, your pebbles are your anchor equivalent, and the sand is your avoid equivalent. And so it's really important to understand in your role, what are your rocks? What are your pebbles? What is sand? And that's what we were talking about in a client session this week. And when I asked the client, what are your rocks? Their answer was, everything is a rock. Everything feels like a rock. Everything in my life is a rock. I can't even think of anything that would be pebbles or sand. My coaching question back in that moment was, is that fact or is that feeling? There was a long pause, and then they said, it's a feeling. I held that pause for that little bit longer, which is what coaching is always great for. And then the client started talking about they hold everything up. Everything they do is important. And because everything is important and because they don't want anything to go wrong, they are trying to control everything because they know that they will put the energy, the effort, the enthusiasm, the attention into what needs to happen for things to happen. So everything feels like a rock because everything feels like it's most important. And we know whether the jar is life or whether the jar is your working week, it still has a limited capacity. There is only so much we can put in the jar. There's only so much that we can hold on to. And so much of this is about identity. It's about our behaviors. It's how we think. It's how we feel. And this is why I always talk about not just coming up with fixes and solutions that solve the problem. We need to look at what is at the root cause. And so often what is at the root cause is the beliefs that we hold, how we think, how we feel. That is everything that is impacting and influencing how we show up. So we have to get to the root cause. And the root cause is often fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of getting it wrong. And so we try to control all of that because if it feels like it's more in our control, we can do what we can and we can control what we do. We can't control what other people do. We can't control how they think, how they feel, how they show up. We might be able to influence it, and especially in a leadership position, we might be able to influence that, but we cannot control it. So if you are also a leader who is treating everything like a rock and you're struggling then to prioritize, you're then struggling to get everything done, that is the question to ask. What is fact? What is feeling? Is it actually a rock or does it just feel like one? And if it just feels like one, what are you afraid of if you put it down? And the other question to ask yourself, how many rocks are you holding on to that aren't even your rock, somebody else's? I want you to think about the rocks that you have. Is it actually a rock or does it just feel like one? And if it feels like one, what are the risks of putting it down? What are the benefits of putting it down? What are the risks of handing it over to somebody else? What are the benefits of handing it over to somebody else? The question is down to you. What is it that you believe is true, which means you see this as a rock? You feel that this is a rock and you are finding it hard to put down. That's light bulb 1. Light bulb 2. Something we've talked about a fair bit because it is, again, a very common problem with leaders. If your team are coming to you for everything, the question is why? If your team are coming to you for everything and it's not because they can't do the thing, they're coming to you for reassurance or they're coming to you for validation, what is it that you are doing that is shaping this behavior? What is it that you are teaching them is true? So going back to that root cause, the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs, what is it that you're teaching them in that moment? When your team are coming to you, what is it you teach them when you respond? There's a difference between a team that can't and a team that doesn't feel they can or hasn't been given the chance to or feels like they need permission to or doesn't trust themselves with their own answers and their decisions. Every time they come to you and you fix, you take away their chance to fix it themselves, which means then you are training them to come to you for the fix because they don't know or they don't have the confidence to fix it themselves. Sometimes it's a knowledge gap, sometimes it's a skills gap, and sometimes it's an action gap, which is why it's really important for you to ask more questions when they come to you to identify, is it a knowledge gap? Is it a skills gap? Or is it an action gap? Because if it's an action gap, you can whittle that down pretty quickly by embedding and supporting and guiding them with their confidence to take action, the confidence in themselves to be self-sufficient, to build that self-efficacy so that they don't need to come to you for a nod, for permission, for confirmation. If it's a knowledge gap, then you can signpost them where to go and find that out. You can talk them through where they can ask questions, how they can find that information out for themselves. And if it's a skills gap, it might be that you are the person to show them that skill, or again, you can signpost them to somebody else who's able to teach them, able to show them how. It does not always need to be you. The more you get into that routine of asking questions when they come to you and finding out what is at the root of their questions, that will then help you to work out what is the best possible solution, short-term and long-term, for that individual. That not just helps them in that moment, it helps them longer term as well. And again, we're going back to identity. How do they see themselves? Do they see themselves as somebody who goes and finds the answers? Do they see themselves as somebody who has transferable skills and will give it a go? Do they see themselves as somebody who is confident in their decisions and in their own skills and knowledge to be able to take that action? If their identity is somebody who likes to check before they do anything, they're going to keep coming to you. So how do you shift those beliefs to help them short term and long term? We know it's so much easier in the moment to give them the answer, tell them what to do, tell them what they need to know, tell them, yeah, that's fine, off you go. That's just going to keep them coming back to you. So worth a thought on what you can do differently to help them, not just short term, but long term as well. Lightbulb 3. When the glass balls get redistributed, who checks that the new person can hold them? So we're going with another analogy. Similar to your rocks, your pebbles, and your sand. This helps you to determine what needs to go in your jar. Then once we've got everything in the jar, I often use the other analogy of juggling all the balls. Quite often people say, just trying to juggle everything. Now, when you're trying to juggle everything, the important question to ask is, which are your glass balls? Which are the ones that you cannot afford to drop or take your eye off? Because if they hit the floor, then the damage is done. So we need to make sure that we know which are our glass balls. Now, what often happens in organizations is somebody leaves, and either as a temporary solution or as a longer term solution, dependent on whether or not they're filling that vacancy, the glass balls of that vacant post get redistributed. So other people pick up some of those tasks by choice because there's a development opportunity there for them, or because it is allocated to them. Now, the question is, if you are managing a team where those glass balls are being redistributed, how do you check that the people who now have them are in a position to hold them? Do they want to hold them? And are they able to hold them, either through capability or capacity? And capacity and capability is really important. We need to make sure, because these are glass balls, we can't afford to drop these. We need to make sure that the person who now has them has capability and capacity. And your role as a leader is to make sure that the person who now has those has both. In the same way that as a leader, your role is to make sure that all of the individuals on your team have capability and capacity for the glass balls that they are contracted to juggle within their roles and their responsibilities. That's what their role is. That's what they are accountable for. That is what they are responsible for. So your role as a leader day to day is to make sure that your team are able to do that. When you are redistributing glass balls, you need to make sure that where those balls are going to the right place in terms of capability and capacity. It has to be sustainable. Even if it is short term, it needs to be sustainable for that time period. And we need to make sure that we are not stretching people so far that those glass balls get dropped. You still carry that risk because often you are the person who is accountable. So we need to make sure that when those balls are redistributed, that you are making sure that the person catching that ball has capacity to be able to add that to the mix, and that they are also capable to hold that ball up in the air. We need to make sure that we have those conversations around capability and capacity. We can't just hand it off and assume that they are good to go. And actually, that's another conversation, which I might well pick up in another episode. But we cannot assume that what looks like a good opportunity for us is going to feel like a good opportunity for other people. Just because we think it would be a great opportunity and for them to develop and grow in their role doesn't mean that that's what that person wants. So especially if this is not within their terms and conditions, it is not within their roles and responsibilities, we need to check capability and capacity, but also that this is something that they want to take on. Otherwise, we are creating a role that they didn't sign up for, and we increase the risk of losing that individual to another department or even another organization. So check in capability and capacity, which will be part of your one-to-one process anyway. But when they are being handed something extra, make sure that you are checking in with them. Okay, those are my 3 light bulbs from this week's client work. There's a lot of link in here with identity of what we believe to be true, identity of how we think and how we feel, and also identity of what path we are on and what direction we are going in. And just because, definitely something to watch for as leaders, just because we see potential and opportunities for people doesn't mean that that's what they see themselves doing. And so we need to have those really open conversations and ask very clear questions so that we are clear and not assuming. Okay, I am going to leave it there. I have got a full day of work ahead of me and then off to the Bristol Young Heroes Awards ceremony tonight. So by the time you are listening to this, the awards ceremony will have been done. We will know who our Bristol Young Heroes of 2026 will be. Looking forward to sharing more about that over the rest of the year when I start to work with them. But that's it for today's episode, and I will be back again soon. In fact, I will be back again next week with another episode for you. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.